Hello, everyone. We are delighted to have you join us today for a fun music history lesson with ACB Connects, a virtual orientation to the Performing Arts Reading Room at the Library of Congress. I'm Gail Brechting, the president of ACB, and it is my pleasure to welcome you today to this wonderful session. Books and libraries were essential to America's founding generation. In 1800, as part of an act of Congress providing for the removal of the new national government from Philadelphia to Washington, D.C., President John Adams approved an act of Congress providing $5,000 for books for the use of Congress, thus beginning the Library of Congress. Today, we have the honor to bring the Performing Arts Reading Room alive. We have two music reference specialists that host the world's largest music collection, where every day presents new mysteries and findings. Kate Miller has been with the Library of Congress since 2009. She has degrees in the arts, musicology, and library science, and is enrolled at Catholic University in the PhD program in musicology. Kate is a member of the American Musicology Society and the Music Library Association, where she serves as co-chair of the Women in Music Roundtable. Kate is also a proud member of the Washington Choir. Melissa Wertheimer has been with the Library of Congress since 2018. She is a flautist and a new music specialist, has held adjunct teaching positions at Johns Hopkins University and Howard Community College in Maryland. Melissa is the past archivist of the Music Library Association. She is currently the vice chair-elect of the Society of American Archivists web archiving section. She gives archives presentations at MLA, the Mid-Atlantic Regional Archives Conference, and many area museums. She holds an MLIS in Archives and Digital Curation from the University of Maryland, a Master of Music in Piccolo from Peabody Institute, and a Bachelor's of Music in Flute from Ithaca College. ACB Connects is sponsored by the Association of Concert Bands, an international nonprofit organization whose mission is to foster excellence in community band music through performance, education, and advocacy. Today's session is presented as a service to our members and as an outreach to the musical community. Now, we have just a few items before we begin today's discussion. ACB Connects is being recorded. Today's session will be archived along with other previously recorded sessions and can be found on the ACB Connects page on our website. Finally, if you have any questions or comments for our guests, please submit them in the chat area addressed to everyone, and as many as time allows will be addressed. Our moderator today is a former ACB board member, retired Colonel Tom Rotundy. His distinguished 34-year military career in the United States Army culminated in serving as the 8th leader and commander of the United States Army Band, Pershing's Own, in Washington, D.C. Now, I turn the program over to our moderator, Tom Rotundy, as we learn about the Library of Congress and the Performing Arts Reading Room. Tom?
Well, thank you so much, Gail. And this past February, I was able to attend a webinar sponsored by the International Conductors Guild that featured a Library of Congress presentation with our two guest librarians. And let me tell you, I was just blown away by that presentation. There are so many documents, artifacts, recordings, you name it, that are housed in the Library of Congress. Many that we have no idea they are even there. So you are in for a real treat as Kate Miller and Melissa Wertheimer take us on a musical journey through this national treasure, the Library of Congress. And I want to remind everyone that before there was Google and Bing and Yahoo, there were librarians. They are the original search engines. So let's first welcome Kate Miller. Kate, please take it away.
Great, thank you so much. Those were all just really lovely introductions, and And I know I'm delighted to join everyone here today and introduce you. I assume I'll be introducing a lot of you to the music division and what we do. And possibly you've heard of us before, but not had a chance to visit or explore our website too much. So I'm hoping that this will open your eyes, as Tom said, to what we have and what is available to you, and that you will find yourself playing with everything you can find online after this presentation. So I think what we're going to do is I'm going to give just a really kind of foundation overview of the music division, who we are, what we have, a little bit of why we have it, so that I can then set Melissa up to then really dive deeper into our specific concert band and band music resources that we have available to you and what you can find online. And she'll bring out some really cool examples that you're all going to be just totally dazzled by. So let's start. And Melissa, if you'll just move to the next slide for me. Perfect. Before we even really get going, I think it's really important to talk about what kind of material it is that the music division at the library has. The library is home to many divisions, and Melissa and I obviously work in the music division. Researchers come to us to find, for one thing, music scores, which you would expect, both published and manuscript scores. They come to find books about music. That could be, new editions. It could be 18th century treatises. And they could be coming to find periodicals, music newsletters, music journals in our collections. And in addition to that group of material, our collections extend to all sorts of other archival material related to music, whether that be correspondence between significant composers or conductors or musical figures, business papers, photographs, scripts, writings, drafts of writings, and much, much more. And I just threw a few kind of fun visual pieces in this slide to demonstrate that we have published music at the top, whether it's a John Philip Souza edition of the Stars and Stripes Forever, or a piece of 20th century sheet music about going to the camp meeting band, depicting concert band life. We also have posters like in the bottom left of the Souza band, photographs. To the right of that, you have Leonard B. Smith with his concert band library behind him. And we'll talk a little bit more about these people and their collections and how they figure into our stuff. You'll notice that I'm not talking about recordings. Those are actually handled by a different division altogether. A lot of people would expect you come to the music division, you're going to find sound recordings, but you would actually go to our Recorded Sound Research Center. And the same goes for film footage as well. We have a moving image research center at the library. So everything is divvied up according to format, you'll find. And we're dealing with largely, I always used to say 10 years ago when I started doing these, I would always say paper-based materials, but it's paper-based materials, but also digital materials, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So yes, so this is the material that we're talking about right now. But also as important as understanding what we have, I think it's going to really help you to have a little tiny slice of history and understand why we have it. So Melissa, why don't you go to the next slide when you can? Great. So here we have two photos. The music department, as it initially was called, was opened in 1897. And if you look at the photo on the left, you'll see this kind of mostly empty room with a piano in the foreground, and might be hard for you to make out, but there's stacks and stacks of material piled up in the back of the room. And we can assume that that's sheet music, as this is identified as the music department around 1900. What you should know is that the music department was established in 1897, right around when this photo was taken. And this coincides with the opening of the Thomas Jefferson building at the Library of Congress, which is directly behind the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., and where it still is. And this is the oldest building of the Capitol Hill campuses for the Library of Congress. It's also, in my opinion, the most beautiful building in DC. So it's certainly a sight to behold. But what this photo sort of captures, and why I really like it, is it captures the fact that at this time, the library's music collections were really kind of exploding due to the ever-evolving state of copyright registration in the United States. So while the first federal copyright law was enacted in 1790, it was in 1870, so 80 years after that copyright functions were centralized at the Library of Congress, and a new copyright office was established. The same year that the Jefferson building opened and the music division or music department was established, there's this new copyright office that's opening as well. And this is actually a huge deal. And why is it a huge deal? Well, the fact that that copyright gets centralized at the Library of Congress means that everybody is sending their copyright deposits, their music or their book or their works, to the same place to get, processed and sorted. And it being at the Library of Congress, it means that it gets to filter into our collections by pretty easy mechanism. And that's one of our collection development kind of decrees, is that we are collecting comprehensively and keeping or preserving these copyright deposits that come in. So that is why we have rooms around the turn of the 20th century that look like this room on the left. Now, luckily, with some really hard work and some bright minds, we do get to a place where our music reading room looks like the photo on the right. Very organized, very clean, no messes anywhere. And that is thanks to our first chief of the music division, Oscar Sonic, who was hugely important in our history and in the history of music librarianship, and was a musicologist himself as well. So his first charge as the first chief was to figure out how he was going to organize all of our music. And he is the one who developed the Library of Congress M classification scheme. So Melissa, if you will pop to the next slide. Great. I think a lot of you are going to be very familiar with this M, ML, MT call number system. M, of course, represents music scores. ML represents music literature, like books, biographies, things you'll find. And then MT refers to music theory and instruction material. So he devised a system. And what I think is just really important to emphasize is the great detail that the system goes into. I'm sure you've run into, you've had to use your library catalogs before, you've found call numbers, but to really read through the entire system and see how detailed this system has become, because of course we have been updating it since it was first established. But this picture, again, this is quite small, so I don't know if you can see it very well, but it does illustrate the detail I'm talking about. This is an excerpt. It's one page out of an entire book that describes the system. And this page in particular relates to solo keyboard music. So you will look down the list and you will see that, M23 call number represents piano, it represents sonatas for piano. But if you go further, but if I'm looking for a piano march, specifically march, I'm going to look under the call number M28. And then after that, you look, it's organized by the last name of the composer in most instances. So everything that comes to the library has a place that it is supposed to be filed in, to live at. And the librarians have been, assigning music to those classification numbers, we call them, for, well over 100 years now. I think that you're pretty familiar with it. If you have more questions about that, feel free to throw some in the chat, and maybe even Melissa can answer a few while I keep talking. Now, okay. I'll just also say, I'm going to keep talking a little bit about the online catalog in a second. But before I do, I just wanted to emphasize that what I've described so far is organizing new music coming in. Sonic also had a vision for creating, a comprehensive library, music library that was going to chart the entire history of Western art music, so that American students at the time did not need to go overseas to study, Renaissance manuscripts or whatever, opera manuscripts, 19th century, whatever you can come up with. He wanted to bring that material to our American National Library. So that meant working with agents in European cities to purchase foreign scores, purchase antiquarian materials. It meant also not just looking to the past, but thinking about developing the present and developing relationships with living composers and also foreign libraries to make sure that we had important scores that needed to be in our collections. So even if that meant hiring like a copyist in the early 20th century to travel and go copy out a particular piano concerto or opera score that we really needed to have in our collections by hand. That's something that we actually did, which is pretty cool. So because of Sonic's vision and commitment, our collections really encompass everything, not just American music, but really everything in Western art music history, from medieval music manuscripts, which we do have, all the way to modern editions that come in, again, via copyright deposit. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that you would expect we have strengths in American music, but our strengths, our additional strengths might surprise you too. So before I go on, and we were just talking about the call number system and Sonic's vision and his legacy. Let's just talk for a second about how that translates into using our online catalog. I just want to give 2 big tips to help you as you hopefully after this session go back and do some digging on your own. So Melissa, why don't you go to the next slide? Great. So I just want to highlight our online catalog and emphasize that searching our online catalog is really different than searching the library's website. If you just go to the loc.gov library homepage and you start typing words or titles or composers into a search bar, you're probably searching the website. But if you're really looking to explore our holdings to the fullest extent you possibly can, you want to get into our online catalog, and there's a clear button on the landing page where you can get to the online catalog. And this is what it looks like. And you'll find that there are actually a few different types of searches that you can do in the online catalog. This landing page kind of lands on a quick search. So if you were just had one search term in mind or something you could use. I want to focus on the advanced search, which is in the center of the screen. And the three black boxes, the center one says advanced search. So I want to focus on that one. That's the one that I use most of the time. So Melissa, you can go forward. Great. So here we are in the advanced search, and as I think you're probably familiar with the many searches that that you can use online and for various companies and stuff, the advanced search allows you to search multiple search fields to include information for multiple search fields in one search. So this is an example. We're just doing screenshots for now, just for kind of ease of moving through the PowerPoint. But I took these yesterday. So let's say you come to the online catalog and you want to find what we have pertaining to John Philip Souza's Stars and Stripes Forever. So I've entered John Philip Souza. I've selected the name personal subject field, or name field, I'll say, from the drop-down menu at the right. And then below that, I said, and Stars and Stripes Forever, and I selected the title field. So I'm just going to try this, and let's go forward, Melissa, and see what happens if I just search those two terms. I land with 146 search results. And it says, titles list 1 through 25 out of 146. And it's telling me that there's 6 pages for me to scroll through of material. And if I were to start scrolling, it would just be kind of a mess of things. It would be sound recordings, scores, there might be books pertaining to it. And one thing I should have, highlighted in my first sentence, but I was going to emphasize later, is that the music division itself holds over 25 million items in our collections alone. So that doesn't even count the rest of the library, the sound recordings, the other divisions. It doesn't count any of that. So one thing to keep in mind is just how unwieldy your searching can get, and how much stuff you might have to sort through. So I wanted to give my big tip that I always give to researchers, classes, whenever I can. Melissa, let's go to the next slide. So we're returning to our search. We're refining our search here. I still have John Philip Souza. I still have Stars and Stripes Forever in the search term, but there's this add limits option that the pink arrow is pointing out. So if you click on add limits, next slide, one of the limits you can specify is location in the library. So I went ahead and selected performing arts, which is going to limit things to the performing arts reading room. This is another kind of point of confusion maybe for some people. Melissa and I work in the music division, and we serve the music division's collections in the performing arts reading room. And I'll kind of come back to explaining that point in just a minute. But that's what you need to know for this, is that they're accessing the performing arts reading room. So if I select performing arts, that's going to limit materials to what we serve in our reading room. So that's one really good way to start narrowing your search. Let's say if you're really just interested in what the music division has. So Melissa, go to the next slide. When we add that limit, we come back with only 38, I believe it says, search results. Only 2 pages that you have to scroll through. So that's a whole lot better than 146. And I'll say I could have picked a crazier example if I used somebody like Beethoven or something like that. That's just crazy. So limits are your friend, and that's just my big plug for using that. Okay. Now I'm just going to do a quick time check. Okay. Melissa, you can go to the next slide. I'm going to move quickly through these next slides so that I can give way to Melissa. But I do need to highlight that after Sonic, he left in 1917, and subsequent chiefs, they established their legacies in new ways. One of the kind of landmark events in our history was in 1925 when Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge, who was a philanthropist and a chamber music enthusiast and aficionado, she partnered with us and established the Coolidge Foundation at the Library of Congress to commission new works from 20th century composers, from living composers at the time. And so this did a lot of things. It's established a precedent for foundations and commissioning, which continues, continues today, actually, with some other foundations that we have set up at the library. It also, she had quite the reputation. So she was commissioning works from the greatest names of the 20th century: Stravinsky, Prokofiev, Bartók, Samuel Barber, and the most famous Coolidge commission is Appalachian Spring, ballet by Martha Graham, and music, of course, by Aaron Copland, which premiered on our stage in 1940. Our stage, I should say, thanks to her. We did not have an auditorium before we met Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge, but it was her idea that, well, if we're commissioning these works, let's premiere them, let's perform them and bring them to life. So it took an act of Congress for the gift to be received, but it happened, and extraordinarily quickly too. In a span of 9 months, they started construction and turned an inner courtyard in the Jefferson building into the Coolidge Auditorium, which you see on the screen in front of you. And she started a free concert series in 1925, and that series continues today. Of course, today it's virtual right now, but I have the link to the concert's website on the screen there, and you should definitely go check out this season, check out past seasons. We do try to put as many streaming videos up of past concerts as we are able to do with rights. So it's something to check out. Next slide, Melissa. And I was going to mention that in addition to the scores and books and the special collections I'll mention in a second, we do also have musical instruments at the in the Library of Congress. Most notably, we do have Stradivari, Amati, and Guarneri strings in our collections. We were actually gifted. It was an amazing gift in the 30s and 40s. There was a woman named Gertrude Clark Whitall who gifted us money to put on concerts with and to purchase really cool music manuscripts with, but she also gave us a quartet of Strads. And those Strads do get played on our concert series. She gave it to us instead of a museum because she was very specific that she wanted them to be played. So they do get played a couple of times a season, and every year on our Stradivari anniversary concert in December. So that's a very cool thing. The other super cool collection that stands out is the Dayton C. Miller Flute collection. I'm going to let Melissa say a little bit more about that later. She is the flautist, so I will let her, shed her expertise on that. But it's a very cool collection that documents the history of the flute through scores, books, clippings, photographs, and iconography, and flutes, like almost 2,000 flutes, I think, in the collection. So, Melissa, next slide. Perfect. This is the last thing I'm going to say before I hand it off to Melissa, that I've made a few references to special collections, and we talked a bit about archival material at the beginning of my talk. And it's important to realize, so this is collection material that is, it's separate, or we consider it separate from the ML, MT material that we were talking about before. This is archival material that comes as its own collection. So it might be the personal papers of someone, like the John Philip Souza collection. It might be organizational records. It might be, you know, the records of ASCAP. It might be materials that, you know, a collector's collection. Dayton C. Miller is a good example of this. He collected all of this material related to the flute, and then gave or left, I think he left it in his will to us at the library. So slightly different types of collections. And the other thing about special collections is each one is unique. Each one has its own material. People save, you know, save whatever they're going to save according to what their career was or what their interest was. The item that you see highlighted on the slide is very cool. It's actually a signed calling card from Abraham Lincoln to Scala, from the Scala papers that we have at the library, saying, will the leader of the Marine Band please call and see, I think it's Mr. L today, on February 4th, 1862, signed A. Lincoln. So this is an example of one of the super cool things that you would find in our collections. That's not music or, you know, something that you would expect necessarily. Not all special collections are processed, but you can find our list of over 500 collections on the Performing Arts Reading Room website. There's a link at the bottom of the page there to the complete list of special collections. And you'll see that some of them have finding aids attached to them. Those are documents that describe the contents of a finding aid. And when that's available, we consider that collection processed because you can see the full description of it. If you can't see that, you might find a link to a catalog record that kind of gives just a very brief description. And we consider those collections unprocessed. So if you ever have a question about a collection, actually, whether it's processed or unprocessed, if you ever have a question about a special collection and getting a question answered about it, or you wanted to see it in the future, you should send us a question via Ask a Librarian, which we will hammer into your heads by the end of this presentation, that you should always feel free to email us via Ask a Librarian on the library website. And we'll give you more information about those collections. And then the next slide, Melissa, this is just a list of some collections from that complete list I mentioned that might be of particular interest to many of you here today. Whether it's a collection that relates specifically to a band leader or someone's collection who has music that's common in band repertoire, as you'll see. So these are collections that you can actually go to that master list and find links to the finding aids for, and read more details about what is in all of those collections. So with that, I think I'm going to pass the mic over to Melissa and let her start to dig in and wow you with what we have.
Hey, everybody. So a quick word about that calling card from the Francis Maria Scala papers. So he was a leader of the President's Own. And so that was why that we had selected that card there. I think it might say Mrs. L. I think I remember a story from a staff member about it being related to planning music for an inaugural ball, and that Mary Todd Lincoln was in charge of that. But we can get back to you about that. The handwriting is a little bit hard to read, but just the fact that it says, can the leader of the Marine Band just come to the White House? You know, it's like you're a conductor on call, it's, you know, ready to go. So anyway, what the portion of the presentation today that I'm going to focus on is going to be talking about what you all can experience from our collections just on the internet, sitting at home. Right now, the Library of Congress Music Division is not open to the public because of the pandemic. And I know that we're all tuning in from lots of different time zones, and some of you may not be able to make it to DC for quite a while. So this is the nation's music library, so we want you all to feel connected to it in some way. And the first section of this presentation, I'll be talking about digital collections, which means items from the music division's collections that have been scanned. So they exist in a paper form and they've been scanned, and then those scans have been put online onto the library's website. Kate had mentioned before that the website is different than the online catalog, so that's where the digital collections live. And then the other portion of my part of the presentation, I'm going to talk about past Library of Congress exhibits that have been made available online. So as far as this introductory slide goes, this gives you a wee bit of a taste of where we're going to be going today. The image on the left is James Reese Europe. This was a photo from the Signal Corps. This is a photo from the end of World War I, about 1918, 1919. And this is James Reese Europe conducting the Hellfighters in Paris. And this is just one of my favorite examples of action shots from James Reese Europe. And this also illustrates why digital collections are so important, because this photo actually doesn't belong to the music division. This belongs to the prints and photographs division, but the content is directly related to our collections, and we have plenty of other objects that are related to James Reese Europe. So this is another reason why it's good to communicate with us through Ask a Librarian, because if you say, I'm looking for photos of James Reese Europe, odds are we may send you to the prints and photographs division, even though James Reese Europe is a bandmaster, and you would think, oh, I need to come to the music division for that. So just keep that in mind. But digital collections were able to unite all of these items that live in different places that share subjects and share topics and content. And we can bring them all together into a virtual space for all of you. The photo on the right is a photo that the music division does own. That is a picture of John Philip Souza later in life, a little bit of a posed action shot. And then the zoomed in background photo is a prize. It is Mozart's Grand Partita. It's part of our Gertrude Clark Whittall collection. So Kate had talked about how Gertrude Clark Whittall had not only donated our priceless collection of Stradivari, Amati, and Guarneri stringed instruments, but also funds to purchase rare materials. And so this Mozart manuscript is one of them. Now, as a flutist, I'm very sad. The highest woodwind in this is oboe. So it's oboe and clarinet and horn, you know, but so I only have to admire this from afar, but at least I have the flute quartets. So I'll leave it there. So on to what digital collections we have that are specifically about band. So you're going to start to see a pattern as I go through. There's a little bit of a rhythm here where I'm going to give you an intro slide to a digital collection to let you kind of know what you're going to see when you land there. And then I'll talk about some specific items of interest. So this first digital collection is called African American Band Music and Recordings. Underneath the orange title is the URL to go directly to this digital collection. The digital collections website for the Library of Congress is very, very large. And so sometimes it's just always good to know exactly where you need to go. So if you look at this screenshot of the landing page of the digital collection, you'll see that there's the collection name at the very top, and that the collection items in this digital collection span from 1883 to 1923. Now, if you remember just a moment ago, I talked about how digital collections are an opportunity to bring together disparate items that are in different custodial divisions, but they share a topic. Kate had mentioned that recordings are not in the custody of the music division, but to make this digital collection rich and really worthwhile, we collaborated the recorded sound section. And so the music division provided the printed music for these stock arrangements for bands and small orchestras that were written by African-American composers and African-American arrangers for band. And then the recorded sound section went into all of their recordings and found items that matched, or even items that were titles that we didn't have music for, but they still are part of this universe of stock arrangements written for band by African-American composers or arranged by African-Americans. So on this digital collections page, you see underneath the title, you see about this collection, and every digital collection landing page is going to look like this. There's going to be a banner at the top with a little bit of a scroll gallery that just gives you a little bit of an enticement with some images, some featured content. And then there's going to be a link that says collection items, and that's just going to be a list with little thumbnail images where you can scroll to your heart's content. Now, the collection items, when you click on it, there will be a left-hand menu. I like to think of it it's kind of like online shopping a little bit, where you can narrow down whether it's by a creator or a place of publication or the original format. So if it's a photo or if it's notated music. So you can narrow down so that you're not dealing with hundreds of items. So in the same vein of the online catalog, where you're giving yourself a little bit of a smaller bite. And then some digital collections, but not all of them, have another section called articles and essays. So some items that I want to highlight in the African-American band music and recordings digital collection are scores that you can download. Now, in the case of this collection, there aren't any full scores, but there are lots of parts, and they're all listed by title, and each page has a lot of information about who the composer is and the arranger and where and when it was published. And so you can download each part. And the music that I really want to highlight is music composed or arranged by James Reese Europe, Will Marion Cook, J. Rosamond Johnson, Robert Cole, Samuel Coleridge Taylor, Montague Ring, and there are many more fantastic African-American composers and arrangers represented in the scores in this collection. Now, I'm also demonstrating here on this slide a little bit of a special kind of experience that you can have with this digital collection in particular. I had mentioned that the recorded sound section collaborated with us to create this digital collection. This is a vintage recording of the bugle call Rag, and wouldn't it be cool to just listen to it and compare it to the parts that you're able to download? Do they match? Are they the same? Do you want to make your own arrangement? So this is a lot of opportunities, not only for you to have an experience, but maybe also have a moment of your own inspired creativity. Another digital collection that I'd like to highlight is one that solely consists of items from the music division. This is called Band Music from the Civil War Era. So as you can see, we have the pattern here where I put the URL really big at the top of the page for you. And then underneath the title in the screenshot, you have about this collection. So what this collection is, summary is telling you is that in 1974, the music division recreated a typical concert of brass band and vocal music from mid-19th century America. And then that concert and documentation around that concert and materials that were used for that concert really became the creative impetus for this digital collection. So this digital collection has musical scores, it has recordings, again, and so actually, I'm sorry, I misspoke earlier. This does have materials that are not owned by the division, photographs, and then also fantastic articles and essays. And I'm going to show you a very special one in a minute here. So this concert had the eminent conductor, Frederick Fennell. And for me, back in my wind ensemble days, you know, that was always the name. You know, you always wanted to play an arrangement by Fred Fennell, and you'd always listen to the vintage recordings of the Eastern Wind Ensemble. And so wouldn't you know that Frederick Fennell came to the Library of Congress and conducted this concert in 1974. And so you can listen to the recordings of that. And I think that's really special that you can do that in this digital collection. And this is stuff you're not going to find on YouTube. So that's the other reason to come to our digital collections. Just because it's not available on YouTube doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So, and also searching Google may not reveal what is in our digital collections because there's these items are described so deep. So search engines can't go as deep as how these items are described in a digital collection. So you may not find this on Google. Sometimes you can, but not always. So this is why you should just know to come here. And so in this case, this is an example of listening to this 1974 performance conducted by Fred Fennell. And then we also included some modern engraving editions that you can download. The arranger had deeded them to the public domain. So those are there for you to download. And this would have been the version that was used for this concert. And then there are also other items that are really important that that were used by military bands during the Civil War. So this is on the right, an example. This is Hail to the Chief. And this is from the Manchester Cornet books. So this is a scan of, instead of paper, this is actually a scan of microfilm. So it's essentially a scan of a scan, if you will, but it's still there for you to download. All of this is available to you. Now, the Dayton C. Miller collection. So Kate had mentioned that this collection is one of our flagship collections in the music division in terms of musical instruments. But what this digital collection shows you is actually how many materials are part of the Dayton C. Miller collection that are actually not instruments. So there's a lot of iconography that Dayton Miller collected. Now, he was a physicist and an acoustician. He founded a department at Case Western University. He ran the physics department there, and he had a relationship with the Library of Congress through one of our librarians whose name will come up later, I promise you, William Lichtenwenger. So everything came to us, I think the bequest was 1941. And so this collection has iconography, so engravings, cabinet cards, photographs, lithographs, magazine covers, any image that he could find that depicted flutes and aerophones in general, because woodwinds, so flute, oboe, clarinet, bassoon, we're part of a larger family of aerophones, right? So and woodwinds, we know that we're a great part of the band of the ensemble, so that we're a great section too. It's not all about brass and percussion, like one would think with all this discussion of military band collections. So at the top, the featured content here is showing you just a sample of some of the iconography, but this digital collection also includes photographs of every instrument that is in the Dayton C. Miller collection. So almost 1,700 flutes, but not just flutes. Other woodwind instruments are in this collection. I really want to emphasize that. We have porcelain ocarinas, there are oboes, flageolets, bassoons, clarinets, E-flat clarinets, and instruments that you would think would never be made in a certain key, and yet there they are. So this is a really fabulous collection if you're into organology, the study of the history of instruments. And you find makers that are the biggest names that you can find, and some of them are, and some that are unknown, but you can explore the history of your instrument. And sometimes it's really cool to think like, oh, I'm performing a piece by this composer. What were instruments like at the time that this music was written? And that can inform your performance practice and your choices that you make as a performer. And also thinking about tone and tone color. So those are all really great opportunities that you have with this collection. Now, unlike Mrs. Whittall's instruments, the stringed instruments that she gave to us, the Dayton C. Miller collection is a study collection. This collection is not made for performance. A lot of the instruments have been very damaged over time, even before they came to us, and some of them that if they were played, they would just simply be damaged because, you know, of the heat and the humidity from breath. So they're in a really nice temperature controlled chamber. And so some of them are on display in the pavilion in the Jefferson building called the Gertrude Clark Whitall Pavilion, which is the permanent display home of the Stradivari, Amati, and Guarneri instruments. But there's also a rotating display of instruments from the Dayton Miller collection there. But this digital collection is where you get to see the instruments that are not on display. Now, I had told you that some of the digital collections include articles and essays. I really, really encourage you to read the articles and essays that are in this digital collection. And that's the screenshot that you see here. You will learn so much, not just about the flute, but also about Dayton Miller and about all the variety of materials that are in this collection, the history of organology, flutes that are made of glass, even patents for inventions about the flute. Some of them were actually submitted to the US Patent Office by Dayton Miller himself. So this is a really rich learning opportunity, this digital collection in particular. Now for the fun part, I get to show you some items that are just a couple of my favorites, because there are literally thousands of items in this digital collection. So starting from the left, you see a porcelain case with some pink velvet that's open, and in front of it there's a tray with 4 joints, and that is the flute that belonged to Frederick the Great, that was made for him by Johann Joachim Quantz. And yes, that is part of this collection. And there are multiple photos of this flute, and you'll find that for every instrument in this digital collection, there are going to be multiple photos. So of it disassembled, in the case, assembled, front, back. Some of them even have schematic drawings that were made by modern organologists. And a lot of people like to do schematic drawings if they wanted to reproduce a historic instrument, for example. So that flute is an extremely important flute in this collection, especially when we think of Frederick the Great's role with commissioning repertoire for the flute, and Quantz's role as a composer and an inventor. And Frederick the Great was even, you know, he was an okay composer, but, you know, we don't think of him in that way, but we also remember him, you know, for his military escapades and the connections to Prussian military music. So this flute represents so much. To the right of that, for me as a piccolo specialist, this one's pretty special, I think, not just to me, but to all of you as well. This one-key piccolo is a piccolo made by John C. Haynes in 1897 for Frank W. Wadsworth of none other than the Souza Band. So this is an important piccolo for all of us here. Below the piccolo is one of the many glass flutes made by the French flute maker Claude Laurent. This particular glass flute is a wee bit more special than all the others because it was made by Claude Laurent for President James Madison. And just another interesting little connection here, that the Performing Arts Reading Room is in the Madison building on the Library of Congress, there are 3 buildings. There's the Jefferson building, which Kate talked about a lot. And then the second building on the Capitol Hill campus for the Library of Congress is actually the John Adams building, which is a beautiful Art Deco WPA building, and actually my favorite building. So Kate and I can duke it out over which one is the prettiest. I prefer the metalwork in the John Adams building, but the Performing Arts Reading Room is in the newest building, and by newest I mean 1979, 1980 James Madison building, and this is actually the nation's monument to President James Madison. So the fact that this flute that belonged to him now lives in a building that serves as his memorial, I think is very special. To the right of James Madison's glass flute is a photograph that is one of the examples of photos that I talked about that are part of this collection. So there's not just the iconography, the lithographs and the drawings and the paintings and the magazine covers, but beautiful photographs. And there are lots of photographs of famous flutists and flute makers. Some of them are autographed, some of them are inscribed either to Dayton Miller or to the person that Dayton Miller bought it from. But this particular photo is special because it's essentially an action shot of the William S. Haynes shop in Boston. This photo is from around 1904. So I think it's really cool to be able to see, you know, what did a workbench of a flute maker look like back then? Is it really that different now? If any of you do instrument repair, I wonder if you'll find any tools and toys in this shop that maybe you have on your own workbench. So this is a very special photo. And then above are examples of, like I promised, historic woodwind instruments that are also part of the Dayton C. Miller collection. So from left to right, we have an E-flat clarinet. So this particular clarinet was made in London by Wood and Ivy. It dates between 1837 to 1847. To the right is a clarinet in D. So remember I told you that there are going to be instruments where you say to yourself, I never thought a clarinet or any instrument would be in that particular key, right? You think about, you know, clarinets in A and B flat and E flat, but oh, there's a clarinet in D. This one's made of ivory, and this clarinet is a beautiful example of that. And then moving over to the right is a flageolet. So this flageolet was made in Munich by Josef Ebner. Whenever I think of the flageolet, so it's not an oboe, because that's not a reed. It looks like a reed, but it's not a reed. Whenever I think of the flageolet, I think of Hector Berlioz. You know, he writes in his memoirs all about how much he loved playing the flageolet, and you know, of course, he played guitar too. But I think he liked the flageolet a little bit more. But maybe I'm just a little partial. And then on the right, we have an oboe, and it actually has multiple joints, multiple mid joints, as you can see. So I think that's pretty interesting. And this particular oboe was made in Dresden in 1798. So when I mentioned earlier that this digital collection is kind of an opportunity to think about the repertoire that you're playing, and you know, is this the type of oboe maybe that was used in the Grand Partita? Just a thought. So there are ways for you to kind of bring everything together. So now on to a man that looms quite large in the band repertoire history, John Philip Souza. So we actually have a couple digital collections related to John Philip Souza. This one is the largest. It's called The March King, John Philip Souza. And this digital collection includes published sheet music, as well as manuscripts and other materials. I definitely encourage you to read the articles and essays. And one in particular is a wee bit more special than the others, even though they're all fabulous. One was actually written by Fred Fennell. It's called The Souza March, A Personal View. And I think it just gives a really nice, it's interesting to read what a conductor has to say about conducting and about repertoire that they live with throughout their career and as they grow as musicians over time. So these are really great articles and essays for you to read within the digital collection. As for items of interest, this digital collection has a wide variety for you. The majority of the items here do belong to the music division, but I will say that there are 19th century music recordings, and they are fabulous. They are the Souza band performing. So I definitely encourage you to listen to them. And again, you're not going to find this on YouTube. So please do come to this digital collection. Other items of interest are printed scores and parts. Now, what's interesting here with the printed music, first of all, these are copyright deposits, some of them, if they're in our general collections. But what's interesting is not only the individual parts, like for instance, this part in the foreground for the Thunder is a first B-flat clarinet part, but the music behind it, Desiree, a comic opera in 2 acts, is written by John Philip Souza. But this is a piano vocal reduction. So this is, on that particular page, is a piano reduction of the overture. So you can see that we're not just looking at band repertoire, but also music by a band master who was a composer and also just so happened to write other kinds of music. So it's other ways to explore him. There are also writings. So we have scanned and put into this digital collection John Philip Sousa's annotated typescript for his semi-autobiographical novel Pipetown Sandy. And then underneath that, I have a little bit of a screenshot. I'd mentioned the Fred Fennell article earlier, but that's a little bit of a screenshot with yet another fabulous photo of Souza and the band. And then in the upper right-hand corner is an example of how this digital collection includes sketches. This just so happens to be a work for band by John Philip Souza. These are his sketches, his draft, so to speak, for the White Rose March. Underneath that, there are so many photos in this digital collection. They're all fabulous. The one on the left has John Philip Souza on the left and the French composer Camille Saint-Saëns on the right. And then the photo on the right is a younger John Philip Souza posing with his baton and all of his medals. Now, also related to John Philip Souza is another digital collection called The Transit of Venus March. So this is a much smaller digital collection than a lot of the ones that I'm talking about today. But this one was put together with a very specific purpose in mind. So this digital collection was actually put together to celebrate a moment of science, the transit of Venus in June 2012. So what's so special about this is that it talks all about the Transit of Venus March by John Philip Souza, but also, and there's plenty of music for you to explore, but there are also materials from other divisions of the library here about this scientific aspect of this astronomical event. And I think this digital collection is an important example of how music just doesn't exist in a vacuum, that music and the sciences can actually come together to bring meaning to one another. And so this is a really great example. If any of you do community outreach, or if you lead or participate in a community band and you're looking for just examples of how music works with other disciplines, I think this digital collection is a fabulous example of that. Another digital collection available to you all is called the Music Treasures Consortium. So the Music Treasures Consortium has music manuscripts and first editions that are not only owned by the Library of Congress, but other institutions around the world. So again, this is one of those examples of how digital collections can bring items that in this case don't even live on the same continent, but unite them digitally so that you can have a better sense of interrelatedness and context. So there is one item in particular that I must draw your attention to. There are so many special things. I mean, you're going to find Brahms, Mozart, Beethoven, medieval manuscripts in here. I mean, it's actually pretty overwhelming what you will find in this digital collection. But the item that is for all of my band lovers everywhere is an item that does belong to the Library of Congress that I spoke about earlier, Mozart's Grand Partita. So through this digital collection, you can download our scans in high res of the Grand Partita, and you can have them all for you. And something that I love about our digital collections interface is that if you, even before you download and you're just viewing the manuscripts on the screen, you can zoom in really, really close. And you can see ink bleeding into the pulp of paper. You can see foxing, which is a type of degradation in paper that happens with some metal trace elements. Sometimes there's a little bit of, dead mold, but it's part of old paper. And you can see wrinkles in the paper as it's changed over time. And you can see the hand-drawn staves. These are not printed staves. There's a tool that makes them with ink by hand. So this experience can be yours, and maybe compare it to some of the instruments in the Dayton Miller collection. Now, another digital collection that you may not think of as being music related is a digital collection called Library of Congress Publications. So this particular digital collection doesn't have a bells and whistles landing page like the other ones, but there is a URL that I put there so you can browse all of the different publications that are there. And many of them actually are from the music division. So the very first one that I want to draw your attention to is a facsimile with scholarly introduction for the Grand Partita. So this publication was printed in 1976. So this was part of a bicentennial celebration of the library's holdings. And so you can download a PDF of this publication. So it includes a commentary by the chief at the time, John Newsom, and he was talking a little bit about the translation. And then there's the original introduction by the musicologist Alfred Einstein in German, and then also an English translation of the scholarly introduction by Alfred Einstein. And then, of course, a facsimile is, it's photographs, it's in color, and it's for you to experience the original in your hands as if it was paper. But in a book form. So you can download a PDF file, and that is the direct link for you to go there. Another publication that I think would be of interest to you all, I said his name was going to come back, and I keep my promises, William Lichtenwenger, who for me also as past archivist of the Music Library Association is very important to me because he was involved in the organization's quarterly journal notes for many, many years. And so I know his handwriting like the back of my hand, and he has a long and fabulous history working in the music division. So he wrote this publication. Again, this was part of celebrating the country's bicentennial. This is called The Music of the Star-Spangled Banner. And you can download a PDF of this. We have a lot of resources to study our national anthem at the library, and including, an original broadside from, this was written during the War of 1812 in Baltimore. So this is a great publication and a great resource. And then another publication that is worth downloading, I have to put in the flute plug, I have to do it, even though it's not about band, it's an instrument that's in band. So it's called The Use of the Flutes in the Works of J.S. Bach. This was a 1950 publication by the musicologist Albert Riemenschneider. So although it may be old and outdated, I think one of the exciting things about archives and special collections and historical research libraries that have been around as long as the Library of Congress has is seeing how scholarship changes over time and seeing how sometimes resources were unknown at the time of one publication and that they get rediscovered or dug up or reattributed later. And so seeing how this change in scholarship, it just contextualizes everything for you about, the stories that we tell in our musical community, the knowledge that we pass from teacher to student to teacher to colleague. And it's an important part, I think, of our story as performers and music lovers in general. So I did promise that I would also talk about online exhibits. So the reason that online exhibits are different than digital collections is because this takes items that were put into the exhibit galleries in most of them in the Jefferson building, but some of them in the reading rooms as well. These were exhibits that were displayed just like in a museum. They had labels like for exhibit text, the physical items were behind cases, and they were publicly viewable for set periods of time. But once those exhibits came down, then everything was photographed and the text was put into this website. So you can actually re-experience past exhibitions from the Library of Congress. So, I'm learning about the library through these exhibitions, even for decades that I didn't even work here. And I think it's really special, especially if you live far away and you can't come to DC. This is a way for you to really stay in touch and to know what's going on. So if you see the hot pink arrow in the lower right-hand corner, I'm pointing to a very itty-bitty link that says View All Exhibitions. And this is where you're going to find the exhibitions that I've selected to share with you that relate to band. So once you click on that link, there's a big alphabetical list. And under the letter C is an exhibit called The Civil War in America. So this particular exhibit ran at the Library of Congress from 2012 to 2014, but you can still experience this exhibit here. And I especially love the exhibit text because you learn so much. Now, earlier I had mentioned a digital collection called Band Music from the Civil War. And there are items from the music division in this exhibit that are not in that digital collection. So that's the other advantage of also exploring these exhibits, is that when items have not been scanned and added to digital collections, you may still get to see a picture of it and learn more about it through these exhibits. And a lot of times the reference questions that Kate and I answer, as well as our colleagues, they have to do with authors and journalists and documentary filmmakers who say, I need a better picture. I need a better file of this picture. I need this picture from my book, or I need this item for my film. And the reason that they found it is because it's in the exhibits, not in our digital collections. So that's another reason I'm sharing this with you. So just a couple, this is definitely not all, but a few of the music division items that I think are important to us here in the band world today. Going clockwise from the upper left-hand corner is fabulous exhibit text about Grant's Grand March. And if you can see that there's a picture of Grant, but the way that this website works, so it's different than the digital collections. The layout is a little bit different. You'll see that like zoomed in thumbnail of his face, but if you click that, it'll pop out into a larger window on your screen, and you'll see the whole image. So you will be able to see it. But this is an item that was used in this exhibit. So this was a score, and it, as you can see in the caption, it says, deposited for copyright December 1862. Moving clockwise, you see Kiss Me Before I Die, Mother. So this was a song, and this is another score that we received. And then moving clockwise, you see a painting. It looks like a painting, but then you click on it and you realize it's a sheet music cover. So this is the Sanitary Fair Grand March. And this talks about the history of that song. And then Avoiding the Draft, which I think is interesting as well, and music that acknowledged how that played out during the Civil War. So these are just a few of the music division items that are in this exhibit. And then I'm going to end with one that was very recent. This was Echoes of the Great War. So this was an exhibit that was up from 2007 to 2019 to commemorate the centennial of World War I. And this exhibit, the layout is a little bit different than a lot of the others. It's a little bit more modern, but it's absolutely stunning. And there is so much music in this online exhibit. I really encourage you to explore it. So you can see that we have this large picture of soldiers, and underneath it, there's this little menu. You see the words explore, timeline, multimedia, exhibit items, events and resources, and credits. So I want all of you, when you go to this website, to click the multimedia button, in addition to doing all the exploring. The reason that I want you to click the multimedia button, so you can see a screenshot on the left of this slide, is because there's so many recordings of band music that were playing in the exhibit hall that you can listen to through headphones. And there are videos here of scholars talking about all kinds of topics related to World War I. And there's even a discussion about James Reese Europe and his role in World War I. And the recordings are just, they're fantastic. They really are. You know, it's a long, long way to Tipperary and all kinds of military marches. So definitely take a look at the multimedia. Do not miss it. The screenshot on the right is something I do not want you to miss. It's called James Reese Europe and Jazz. And some of the best images here are actually memoirs of Jim Europe by Noble Sissel. So when you think of Noble Sissel, Sissel and Blake, UB Blake. And Noble Sissel served under James Reese Europe in the band during World War I. And you would think, oh, it's Noble Sissel, it's about James Reese Europe, this should totally be in the music division's collections. It's not. This is one of those moments where, again, this actually is part of the NAACP papers, which is in the manuscript division. But there are samples of the typescript here on display for you to read and zoom in. And then there's also sheet music that you'll find, that you may recall the image of from the African American band music and recordings, the stock arrangements digital collection. And then you may see a little image down there, a close-up thumbnail of a brass player, and that is the photo, the US Signal Corps photo that I introduced my entire portion of this presentation with at the very beginning. So definitely explore the Echoes of the Great War exhibit. And I'm going to wrap up with a list of helpful links, because Kate and I have talked about a lot of different resources today, and sometimes it's just helpful to have the links right in front of you. And so going down, we have the link to get to the Performing Arts Reading Room homepage. This will especially be important when the reopening schedule gets announced during our phased reopening during the pandemic. And always in the meantime, keep in touch with us through the next link, which is our Ask a Librarian link. The third link is Performing Arts at the Library of Congress on Facebook. Honestly, this is one of the easiest ways to kind of keep in touch with what's going on, because we will post links to our online free concerts. We will post when there's a new blog post on our blog. We will post just, information about cool new acquisitions, or, an item that we're featuring from the digital collections, if it's the anniversary of a composer's birthday or something like that. So it's just a great way to keep in touch with us there. And then speaking of the blog, there's a link for our blog. Kate and I write for the blog pretty frequently. And then below that is the link that is the meat and potatoes of what I was talking about today, our digital collections. And then below that is something new at the library. This is called Library of Congress Research Guides. And there actually is a guide to stock arrangements. And I'm working on a guide for conductors right now. We have so many different research guides from the music division that will help you for very specific topics find your way through our resources. Below that is a link that Kate already shared with you, which is a link to the Library of Congress concert series. And then below that is the concerts on YouTube. So you can rewatch fabulous concerts that are on our stage, or ones that were shared through us during the pandemic. And then there's the link to the online catalog, and then the link for the finding aids for special collections. So now, that wraps it up for me, and we are ready for questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Kate and Melissa. This is just fascinating information, I have to tell you. But we have a couple questions. We have time for just a couple, but I did want to remind our members here that we are recording this session, so a lot of those links, those URLs that you have for us for specific areas, you can go back and look at this session again and copy those down as well. You covered a lot of the things we wanted to talk about. Somebody did ask, how would someone donate collections to the Library of Congress? How would they go about doing that?
Oh, I can answer that. Phone was ringing for a second. If somebody has a collection you either have in your possession, or somebody, You're welcome to send us. I think the easiest thing is to send us an email via Ask a Librarian, which was on that list that that Melissa was just sharing. That's really the easiest thing, because then we can either, get you in touch with the right specialist on our staff who maybe has some ideas specific to the topic, or put you in touch with a different organization or institution or something like that. That's the easiest.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you. Are there tours available if somebody, when you guys open up again, are there tours available for people to come to the Library of Congress?
Well, the library has announced that we are opening in a very, phased reopening of reading rooms starting in June. We will be among the second group opening, and it's only going to be by appointment for researchers who really have to be on site, have to be looking at specific on-site material. So we won't be opening for music division tours or orientations anytime in the foreseeable future. And I don't know what will be happening with the library's kind of main visitor services office. That will be something that you can just stay tuned to, visit the library's landing page, and there's information always linked to above about what's open.
I'll add to that just like the National Gallery and the Smithsonian, a later phase for us will be timed tickets for entry for the public. But again, you won't know when that has begun until you've gone to the library's website, because this is an evolving situation, as everybody knows. So.
Right. And it was just so fascinating to see, those digital copies of scores, in parts and things like that. And I just want to remind our members that as long as things are in the public domain, we can download those from your website and actually perform those with a group. So, but they have to be in the public domain. And, if they're not, because I know some of your information is not public domain, you have to double check. If it's not, obviously we have to pay, royalty fees for performances and things like that. I have one last burning question from somebody before I let you guys go. And since we all know the Library of Congress is a national treasure, is there really a president's book of secrets? Sorry, I asked. Well, listen, sadly, we've run out of time. So as Professor Harold Hill from the Music Band would say, Madam's Librarian, thank you so much for giving us such an interesting, superb, and delightful presentation. The Association of Concert Band is indebted to you both for sharing your valuable time with us today. So let's all give Kate and Melissa a virtual round of applause.
Thank you for having us. We're delighted, and just keep contacting us with more questions that you have.
Ask a
Yes.
librarian. That's
Yeah.
right. Ask
Yeah.
a librarian.
Thank you so much for having us, and hopefully we can all play with each other soon. I was
Yes.
recently in an outdoor orchestra concert, so hopefully all of our bands can also start playing together outside as well.
Yes. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to our ACB president, Gail Brechting.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful. We're so pleased that you came today to learn about the Library of Congress and what it has to offer us as musicians, and how we can utilize this truly amazing collection. We would like to thank our special guests, Kate Miller and Melissa Wertheimer. I would also like to offer a special thank you to our moderator, Tom Rotundi, and to the whole ACB Connects production team. Be sure to check the ACB website for the details and registration information for future sessions of ACB Connects. For the links mentioned today, and to access all previously recorded sessions of ACB Connects, please visit our ACB website homepage at acbands.org. And you'll also find information about becoming an ACB member. If you aren't yet, and details on future sessions of ACB Connects and a wealth of other resources. We'd love to have you connect with us on our ACB Facebook page, where you'll see informative and timely posts. In conclusion, thank you for being with us today for this special opportunity to create new connections. We're planning ACB Connects programs for this summer, so stay tuned for more wonderful programs to enhance and enlighten you on your musical journey. And until then, happy music making with your friends and good health.